Well, today we're looking at transitions. Now, transitions are an important part of making what you say relatable or understandable, or not losing your audience, not having your audience misunderstand what you have to say. Transitions occur in all types of speech. In writing, it's pretty obvious. Really good writing will transition at two levels, the sentence level and like the discourse level, or like the essay level. So the sentence level, what you see is that you'll have several sentences, subject, verb, object is the most common thing. And then you'll have a word that links two of those sentences together. And, or, so, but, for, yet. And that'll lead your reader to transition from one sentence to another. That's pretty obvious. Other ways to do it at a sentence level is to have a subordinate clause, or to put one sentence under another. That would be, for example, while, or during, or although. And so that's another way of forming it together. And there's actually dozens and dozens of linkages that you can occur. The ones that I had mentioned at the beginning, and, or, but, for, yet, so, are linked together with a comma after the first sentence, one of those words, and then the second sentences. Everything else is either linked together in the clause, like I just said with the subordinate clause, clauses that link, add to part of the speech, or they're linked together with a different word, and those words can be moreover, however, therefore, or probably the most common ones. But there's dozens and dozens, and you could say in contrast or similar to or something like that. All right, so those are all sentence level transitions, and those are found throughout a paragraph or throughout a talk as you link your words together. Now the other one is discourse level. Now discourse level makes one part of your section or one idea to another. So the most common one that you're taught is chronological, by time. So first and second and third, or in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end, or first, then, or next, then, and finally. But actually more common and more useful are thematic transitions or thematic linkages between your text. And those are a little bit more common, a little bit harder, I should say, to understand. What you should think about there is you should think about what's the relationship between these two objects. So for example, what's the relation between, what relation does and show? And if one paragraph is a continuation of the other paragraph, you could use a transition like in addition, which basically says I'm going to continue to develop this idea. Now, the opposite of that is, what if you're backing out? What if you're backing away from the details? You could say globally, or more broadly, or more generally, or at the fundamental level. So that's kind of the opposite of in addition or furthermore, or kind of backing it up a little bit. So in addition to these sentence level and discourse level, well, those are the two ways. You have that not only in writing, but you can see it in presentations. So how does a class usually start? It usually starts with hello, good morning. Last class we were talking about blank. Today we're going to talk about blank. That's a transition. And so that beginning transition is really obvious. But there's also transitions between any part of a class or a lecture or a presentation. You'll probably notice some transitions in what I'm saying right now. And so these transitions can be obvious and explicit. They can say, all right, to continue this idea, or in contrast to this idea, or looking at this idea theoretically, or looking at this idea practically. Those are all thematic type transitions. You can also have a more implicit or implied transition. For example, you could just start talking about a new subject, or you could do a slightly different look, or you could change the PowerPoint slide. These are things that aren't done linguistically, but they're done like paralinguistically, we call it, or in addition to the language, through your body language or through the context around you. All right, so far we talked about transitions, how they're important. We talked about sentence level, we talked about discourse level, and we talked about writing, and we talked about presentation. So what about conversation? What about talking with somebody? Are there any transitions in that? Yes, there are. But they're mostly implicit. They're mostly in subject changes or agreements or disagreements that go and move at a rather fast pace. So I'd ask you to think about your conversations and said, if I was going to make that into a book, what would be the chapters of that conversation? What would be the beginning, the middle, the end? What would be the themes? How were those themes transitioned? And that'll be very useful, a very useful way to do that. And so linguistically, why is it useful? And why have these transitions? Well, it helps the audience follow it. But what about you as an audience member? You as someone who's listening to a presentation? How can transitions help you? Well, what the transitions do is they allow you to segment or make chapters into what you're hearing or to what you're reading. And what that is that's allowing you to say, at this point, do I understand what they have to say? At this point, am I confused or not? And if you want to clarify that in a conversation, you could say, it feels like you just said, or I think you were telling me that. And so what you're saying is, and then give a summary of that. In a classroom, you can essentially do the same thing, or that's usually a good point to ask a question before you move on to the next topic. And people enjoy getting questions usually. In writing, it's pretty obvious that what the transition does, and it allows you to go back and say, okay, at this section, did I get their main point? Or were there several ideas here? And if so, was it poorly written, or did I not read it correctly? All right, so in conclusion, there's my transition, most common conclusion. And actually, they say when you say in conclusion, people actually start listening. We've got transitions that are an essential part of speech. You find them in sentence level, just between different parts, and, but, for, those are all transitions. You find them at discourse level, between sections or between topics. They can have the same purpose as sentence level. Most commonly taught is chronological, first, second, third. Most commonly used is thematic. This is a development of, or this is a theoretical aspect of these type of transitions. What they do is they allow you to improve your speech by helping your audience to follow along. But how do they help the audience to follow along? Is it gives them a set point. If you're into computers, it gives them like a recovery point, a point where you can recover back to, and you know, okay, up until that point I understood. Or this whole past 5 minutes of text, I don't understand the point of this, so I need to ask a question, or I need to go back and later look at what exactly was that topic about. All right, thank you very much.